Bump it up, bump it up, bum. Welcome to the Power Lunch live show, which someday I will make a proper video introduction for. But today is still not that day. But we still bring on as many as 5 great guests, sometimes less, usually not more, talking about all kinds of interesting things, having a fun and frolicking conversation. Before that, let me share you the thing I'm really focusing on. Some of you know about it because you're watching in the Entrepreneur Resource Community Facebook group. The Entrepreneur Mentor Community. It is a place for trustworthy, knowledgeable coaches with integrity who want to share what they know, to connect with people who want to know what they know. It's all about community and support and generally good stuff. There is a free Facebook group called the Entrepreneur Resource Community, which I said many of you are going to be watching this in, so you know about it. And there is a membership program as well. I encourage you to check it out, guywhoknowsaguy.com/EMC. And I use the first 6 seconds for that because that's how long it takes people to find live feeds while they're running, and nobody wants to hear what I'm promoting. No, that's not true. What I'm promoting is awesome. You'll love it. But what you really want, the reason that you actually click the button is because you want to see who the guests are hiding behind me. You ready to see them? All right, here we go. Whoosh! Look, we've got guests. John, Preston, and Kathy. Is it Motlagh?
Motlagh.
Motlagh?
Just like jet lag.
Oh, Motlagh.
Oh, that's easy.
So when you have too much mott, you get lagged about it. Yeah, makes
That's
sense.
right.
Okay. So let's meet our guests. Now, them tell us a little bit about themselves, starting with John Preston.
Well, thank you, Michael. My name is John Preston. I am with Best Version Media. We do magazines across the country, community magazines. I personally have launched 4 magazines. I've overseen the launch of almost 50. And we're really designed to help small businesses. And along the way in this magazine world, I've developed a tremendous passion for helping small businesses. What I've realized is from thousands of meetings with small business owners that most small business owners are very, very good at what they do. They just lack the training and the education to really run a business doing it effectively. And it's why so many small businesses go out of business. And I reflect back on when I was a teenager. My mom and dad quit their jobs to open up a travel agency. So that first year of travel agency, they worked their butts off. I mean, 80-hour weeks, and really they weren't making any money at all. And so they went to this conference in Vegas. And at this conference, they ended up, as most people do, down in the bar, talking with other conference attendees. And they ended up having a conversation with a very successful travel agent. And he was talking about all these really expensive trips he had sold and these big vacations, around the world cruises, $30,000 cabin in Tuscany, those kind of things. And my dad and mom were sitting there just listening to him, just amazed. And finally, my dad had enough drinks in him to ask, how do you do that? All we can sell are airline tickets and these cheap 3-day Caribbean cruises. And the guy looked at him and says, well, what do you advertise? He says, well, I advertise these 3-day cruises because that's all anybody wants. And the guy looked at him and said, well, you've got it backwards. Because that's what you advertise, that's what people think you offer. You've got people in your community paying $30,000 a year for these vacations, but they're doing it with someone else because they think of you as the guy that sells cheap cruises. So my mom and dad came back, they revamped their business, they did away with their airline tickets, they started focusing on bucket item lists and targeting very select travel packages. A year later, they had probably a third of their customers. They worked 40 hours a week, but they were making 10 times as much money. And I think of how much my life would have been different if they had not had that 5 minutes of education at a bar in Vegas while they were in business. And so one of the things I've really committed myself to is being that person who provides that 5 minutes. So every time I meet with a business owner, I want to make sure that I tell them something which will help them make better decisions in their business that will help their business grow, because who knows what impact that's going to have on their kids, their grandkids, themselves, in terms of making for better lives for those folks. So that's really what I try to do within my business with the magazines, but also in everything I do. I do 2 separate podcasts, one called Small Business in Small Bites, which targets the external factors that businesses face, how customers make decisions, how to choose what advertising to do, that sort of thing. And then I do a second one called Wake Up to Success, which deals with the internal struggles that entrepreneurs face. Until you've run your business, you don't realize how loud that inner voice can be. And we all have that inner voice that's just, quite frankly, a jerk, and it'll stop us from accomplishing what we want to do if we listen to it. So those are the challenges facing entrepreneurs, and those are the things I try to work with and help business owners understand what they're doing, both internally and externally, so they can take their business to the next level.
Fantastic. We're definitely going to dive into a few of those things. But first, Kathy, let's meet Kathy.
Hello, Michael. It's so good to be with you. John, good stuff. Love what you do. That's fantastic. So I'm Kathy Motlagh, the co-founder of Think Virtues. What we do is broad, but we're a holistic coaching, consulting, education company for entrepreneurs and leaders. Broadly, what we work on is their consciousness, which is our least used faculty. It's who we truly are. So we dig into who each entrepreneur, leader, CEO is, because that's the most important. Without knowing who you really are, granularly, crystal clear, then your why and how and what is really kind of fuzzy as well. So consciousness is how we connect with one another. Consciousness is our sense of purpose, our sense of what we value most. But most importantly, consciousness, as in terms, in physics terms, is our ability to connect with other people and things outside of ourselves through raising our own levels of consciousness. So it's really extremely, it's a critical thing for business owners, for entrepreneurs, for leaders of organizations to take interest in and learn about, elevate, and master, because it really lends into, gives rise to things like a healthy culture, a healthy sense of self. And when you talk about cultural development and creating psychological safety without higher levels of consciousness, it's kind of impossible, because we fall into ego consciousness, which is judging us, criticizing us, and so if people don't feel very comfortable and aren't at their best with those types of situations and things, and so they don't collaborate, they sometimes feel bad and they won't come into work. So to really have high engagement, really rocking teams that accelerate your growth and really get you where you want to go, you really need to learn about consciousness, learn about how to cultivate it, how to enhance it, and how to really master it. So broadly, that's what we do. That's what, I mean, we do a lot of other things, but that's just, I think if we focus on that, it would really serve people well today.
Yeah. Well, and what I like, sometimes I'm always like, so what was the universe thinking when they put these people together on this show? Clearly, the people John's talking about can probably benefit from what Kathy's talking about, and there's probably overlap both ways with the more strategic level marketing versus or plus the strategic level of self-understanding. Understanding who you are, what you want to be doing, and then how to find the people who align with that to really bring them in.
Hey, Michael, I want to say something about what Kathy just talked about.
Take it away. Normally I'd been break out and be like, let's lead off a topic, but I think we just did. So go, talk.
Well, I'm listening to Kathy talk about consciousness and higher levels of consciousness. And I want to share a little background about me. My degree is in physics. And I got away from physics, didn't want to be a physicist. So I went into television news and ended up doing that for 22 years before I ended up going down the path I'm on now. And I can tell you, as a physicist, as a hard scientist, I used to think all of the talk about self-improvement, consciousness, affirmations, visualization, meditation, I used to think all of that was just crap. And I'll tell you why, because as a scientist, I had a hard time wrapping my mind around that when you do certain things to raise your consciousness, that suddenly the world just opens itself up for you to be successful. What I've come to realize over the past 5 or 6 years working with some of the people I work with BVM is that I was missing a factor. What I was missing is the fact that most people go through life right at the edge of being totally paralyzed by fear and self-doubt. And they waste so much of their energy worrying and stressing and trying to not make mistakes that they're never ever able to move forward. So in essence, we operate at about a 5% efficiency rate. And when we can learn to control those inner thoughts, and we can learn to hold them back at bay through whatever technique we decide to use, suddenly we go from 5% efficient to maybe 10% efficient or 12% efficient. And once we do that, we have such a competitive edge over the rest of the world that we can't help but find success. Mm-hmm. I mean, everyday success is determined by very small decisions we make. And if our head is in a better place, we make better decisions. And we make thousands of these throughout the day. And I'm a firm believer that the difference between most entrepreneurs and you're truly successful, your Bill Gates, your Elon Musk, those kind of guys, is that they make a few more right decisions each day. They still make the wrong decisions most of the time, but they make a few more right ones. Mm-hmm. And when we can do things like Kathy talks about understanding our consciousness and putting that inner voice at bay, it helps us make more of those right, what I call micro decisions.
Yeah, that's a very good point, John. And I think I'm so glad you brought that up because people have this understanding that if you, through raising your consciousness, you're automatically going to become successful because you attract these types of things. And that's, you attract success. And I think that's a really important point to talk about because it isn't that your success is guaranteed by consciousness alone. But most of the business people that are attracted to the work that we do already have nailed their strategy, nailed their marketing, nailed all their other components of a business. But what's missing is that they're not landing it. Things aren't clicking. Things aren't working. Teams aren't at their best. And you're absolutely right. Without work with consciousness, you're only tapping into 5% of your workforce, 5% of your own capacity. That's why I said I started the conversation with it's our least used faculty, because once you master your consciousness, then it gives rise to you nailing your messaging, nailing your purpose and why you do what you do, how you do, and everything else will line up, because this is usually when things are stuck, when things aren't moving as fluidly or as in flow as they should. What's missing is that component of consciousness strengthened and mastered. Does that make sense?
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah. Yeah. So it's not that, this is going to automatically happen, but without it, you're not nailing and you're not tapping into your full potential. You're not tapping into your team's full potential. You're leaving 95% of the power of your organization, yourself, your teams on the table. So that's what's at stake for people who haven't caught on. It's the latest area of study in physics right now. Dr. John's lab has done significant work on it at Princeton University. There's other physicists who've done the same, and so it's pretty cool stuff.
Absolutely.
Yeah, and I completely I get that idea of the paralyzed by fear. And I think even once you get to the point where you're like, well, I'm not afraid, I'm willing to take those chances. You're not there's always another level you need to break through when you get to 6% efficient from 5%. Yeah. And you're like, all right, yeah, no, I'm not paralyzed by fear. It's not that. It's, now it's distraction. Now it's overwhelm. Now it's Like there's always another layer to peel away. And that's a lot of the challenge. Of course, you don't know what you don't know either. And I think part of the challenge too is that the world is so complicated that we're built to be really super smart in an environment where you have to deal with a lion now, and now you've escaped the lion. Now you have to gather some berries. You've gathered some berries. All right, now it's raining, so you have to get to shelter. But not like, well, I escaped the lion, but now the lion might be bearing me a grudge and might be going against lion friends, so I need to negotiate with the other lions to, like, we're not built for the level of complexity of the business world. And so I think some of that consciousness is you have to unlock the computing power just to be able to grasp enough of the complexity of business and the world and marketing to make it work.
Yeah,
Absolutely. Yeah.
And you know what? One of the things. Oh, go ahead, Kathy.
Well, no, I was just going to add that you had mentioned it also, John, and fear is a very, it's kind of a perfect example because most people that we analyze, most teams that we analyze are in fear consciousness. And what leaders need to know that fear consciousness is not just being afraid. It's stress consciousness. It's overwhelm consciousness. It's anxiety consciousness. Those are all at the same level as fear consciousness when it comes to studying and being on the map of consciousness. So when leaders lean in and learn more about this topic, then they can really figure out exactly what's missing in the team and really help them get unstuck and get productive and feel better about themselves and not, because mindfulness is great. Mindfulness exercises are great. I'm a huge fan of mindfulness. Mindfulness alone does not work as well. It works temporarily, but on a permanent basis, it doesn't really improve people's quality of mind. They really need to dig in more and deeper and really get to the core of the issues that are triggering them.
I don't know. One of the best books I've read in a while was Gary John Bishop's Un-F Yourself, which I know a lot of people see the cover and they run away from it. But one of the things he talks about in that book is how we all are addicted to certainty and predictability. That we want to always be able to know what the outcome of any situation is going to be. And we will choose that even if we know that outcome to be bad. And that's something that I see regularly. I'm sure you see regularly when we're talking about, exploring new options and new ways of doing things, or in my case, new marketing avenues. We may know that if we don't do something, our business is going to fail, but we will choose that certainty of failure over the uncertainty of what might happen if I do something different. And when you really start to break that down, that's terrifying that people will choose to stay in inefficient and bad situations just because they know what's going to happen, and that's more comfortable than going somewhere where they don't know what's going to happen. And I could easily see that as business owners look to explore your avenues with consciousness and things. They know they're on a bad course, but at least it's a course they know what's going to happen. And they would choose that over trying something that leads to an unknown result.
Absolutely. I call that syndrome is suffering and comfort syndrome. We suffer, but we're comfortable with it, so we stay there. But that's really I love your deep understanding of this topic. I think it's so important for marketers and people who do what you do in terms of getting the word out for small businesses to really have a deep understanding of this, because it really, I'm sure, helps you in what you do.
Yeah, well, there's a couple things. I guess, one of the things I struggle with all the time when I'm talking with businesses about their growth and their marketing, not just in my magazine avenues, but in other avenues as well, is a lack of understanding of how people make decisions. And I'm going to share a story with you real quickly that happens all the time. I do a lot of speaking at like Rotary clubs and Chamber of Commerce's and things like that, where you have business owners gathered. And one of the things I like to do, they all know I'm with a magazine company when I walk through the door. And so they're expecting me to, talk about rah, advertising magazines, blah, blah, blah. And one of the things I'll do is I'll ask them, I'll say, hey, if you were to go to stand up from your chair and you twisted your back and you felt this pain shoot down your back and you knew you needed a chiropractor, how many of you would drag yourself to the car, drive home, drag yourself to the living room, and spend about 30 minutes flipping through magazines until you found an ad for a chiropractor? And suddenly nobody raises their hand. And I'm like, now, of course you wouldn't. You're hurting. You're in pain. You've got to find something fast. And I said, now, how many of you would pull out your phone and do a search for chiropractor near me? And everybody hand came up. Of course, that's what they would do. And I said, now, questions are going to get a little harder. I want you to raise your hand if you always skip the top item in the search results. Do you always skip over it? And every hand in the room always goes up. And I was like, of course you do. We have this internal sense of justice that whoever's in that top spot cheated somehow. They paid for it or they manipulated the system to get there, and we're not going to reward them for that. So we skip over them. And then I say, well, now, I don't want you to say anything out loud because I don't want to embarrass anybody. But I want you to think about how much money you've spent trying to be that top item in that list that everyone in this room would have skipped. And you can start to see this dawning pop up. And then I say, now I'm going to tell you how people use Google. And I've got the research to back it up, but I won't need it because it's exactly how you use Google. I say the first thing you're going to do is you're going to do that search for chiropractor near me. And your Google is going to give you a list of 15 chiropractors to choose from. And you're going to scan down that whole list. And if you haven't heard of any of them, you're going to start reading the reviews and see who's got the best reviews. If you've heard of only one of them, that's the guy you're going to call. You're going to call him without thinking about it. But if you've heard of more than one, you're going to go down that list and whichever one, when you see a name you've heard of, you're going to attach an emotional score to that business. It's either going to be positive or negative. And whichever business gives you the highest positive emotional score, that's the one you're going to choose. And you're going to click on it and you're going to call whatever number pops up because your back's hurting and you're in pain, you need fast. You're not going to go search down some special phone number a marketing company created to put in an ad to track it. You're going to call whatever number pops up. You're going to schedule an appointment. You're going to show up for the appointment. The receptionist is going to say, how did you hear about us? And instantly, without thinking about it, you're going to say, I did a Google search. And all Google did was create a list of choices. But we as human beings always attribute our decisions to how we created our list of choices and not to why we made the decision we made. So that receptionist is going to turn around and write in her little notepad tracking ads, I got this customer from Google. Well, there were 14 other chiropractors on that same page that didn't get chosen. But that's some of the counterintuitive things that happen in the advertising world that business owners don't understand, so they make very poor decisions. And that same sort of process takes place. Say I need a plumber. I go on Facebook and say, hey, does anybody know a plumber they'd recommend? I've got 12 friends, recommend 12 plumbers, and I go through that exact same scoring process in my mind to determine which one I pick. But that plumber just hears, oh, I found you on Facebook. Mm-hmm. And we don't take into account that it's other elements of your reputation and your brand that determine that. Same exact thing happens if I go to pick a salad dressing at the shop, at the grocery store. I look at all those different salad dressings, and if I haven't heard of any of them and none of them give me a positive emotional response, I pick the cheapest one. But if I've heard of one and I have fond memories and fond connections and a fond impression about it, that's the one I pick, even if it's going to cost $1.25 more. And that's part of the psychology of how customers act that business owners simply don't think about. They don't think about how they themselves make decisions. And they don't think about how that customer, what process led them to choose. It's not just where they saw their ad, it's the emotion of seeing that ad that created an impression. So you were selected from a list of options. So.
Very good point, John. Very good point. I mean, the fact is that our limbic system is in charge. We're social emotional beings making emotional decisions, and then we justify them with our logic and you know, our cognitive thinking. And so it's very interesting as you're telling the stories. I'm thinking, yep, I've done that. Yep, I've done that.
And everyone does. I mean, those are universal habits.
Yep. Yes.
So it's fascinating, you know, hearing you tell that story. You know, brings me back because I was a BVM publisher, which I believe where John and I met up until 2020. And now, if I could have told that story as well as you did, I'd probably still be a BVM publisher. But sorry, I didn't mean to make you choke there. But because I've told that, I've tried to tell that story, but I didn't explain it quite that way. But I think also you gain the perspective of being a coach and a connector and doing all that I've done since then has given me more perspective that like, oh, I get that now. Oh, okay. Yeah, no, I now I understand it. And of course, the fact that I used to think that that the ads were expensive until I saw everything else. And realized like, holy, these are cheap.
These are really cheap.
Yep.
You know, it's interesting. And you know, I know we're kind of just moving around here a little bit, but one of the things that I deal with in advertising, and you know, when I talk with business owners understand what advertising accomplishes. They misunderstand, I mean. Most business owners think the only thing you can do with advertising is to get leads. There's actually 5 things that affect every business's profit. You know, business is in business to make profit. And there's 5 different components that determine how much profit you make. The first is leads. How many people know about your product and think about it? The second one is closing percentage. What percentage of those leads actually become customers? You know, a good marketing campaign can never get you a new lead, but if it doubles the percentage of those people who choose you, then you double the business. So a third one is how many times your current customers use you. If they use you once a year or compared to once a month, obviously that affects your profit. The fourth is what's your average revenue per transaction? How much money do you get from each customer? And then the last one is what percentage of that goes to profit? What's your profit margin? And for any business, I don't care whether it's Walmart or the guy with the kiosk selling sunglasses at the mall, those things determine how much profit you make. And a good ad campaign decides which one of those 5 needles can I move the easiest, and then targets moving that needle and resulting in greater profit. And what happens is, of those 5, the hardest to manipulate and the hardest to quantify is how many leads you get, because you just don't know what people are thinking and whether they need your product or any of that. But unfortunately, most businesses target only getting more leads as their entire marketing campaign, when it's so much easier to improve your closing percentage. It's so much easier to get your current customers to use you more often. It's so much easier to increase your average revenue per cost. And most people don't even think that marketing can be used to increase your profit margin, because it can be used to manipulate your expenses. Because if you're let's say you're a roofing company and you market yourself in a way that you're doing jobs 4 or 5 hours away from your location, your travel costs are suddenly enormously high because you're paying per diem to your workers. You're putting them up in hotels overnight. Your gas prices is certainly a factor, traveling back and forth. And so your profit margin is actually impacted by travel costs. Well, all you need to do is target a marketing campaign that gets you closer to home jobs, and suddenly your travel expense goes down and your profit margin goes up. But people don't think of it in those terms. They simply think the only reason I advertise is to get more leads, and that often leads to a business going under.
Yeah.
Very interesting.
Yeah,
I agree. I think that those are very important components.
One thing I've seen, juxtaposing like what I've seen the last 2 years is mostly the online space, coaches, course creators, things like that, which is more the kind of thing that like online marketing is built for, in terms of funnels, the ad that gets you to go to the free thing that gets you the $7 course that gets you into the Ascension model, which is absolutely wrong for a roofing company. But there's not a lot of social media marketing content made for the kind of people who advertise in the local magazine. So what they're getting is YouTube videos and education meant for course creators and saying, oh, yeah, I saw this great thing. It taught me about how to make $1 million on Facebook. They're like, great. Are you building a course on roofing? Because if not, you're using a course creator marketing strategy for a home services company. And they don't understand that different type, not necessarily industries, but different types of products, a virtual course is going to be sold a very different way than somebody coming to your house with a truck and a hammer.
Exactly. And the other part of that is when you look at what the way most people try to bridge that gap, Michael, is they try to use the online area and use discounts and coupons and savings and call to action items and things like that to kind of bridge that gap. And what they don't realize is that most businesses fall guilty to the Pareto principle. They're getting 80% of their profit from 20% of their customers.
Yep.
And that also means that 80% of their customers are only generating 20% of their profit. And when you use those type of campaigns to bridge that gap between digital and the real world, what you're doing is you're setting up a marketing plan that targets those 80% that are virtually profitless. And so you end up becoming you have a lot more work, a lot more customer base, but your business goes under because none of those customers are putting money in your pocket. And that becomes a big thing. And I can actually mathematically show, I do some stuff. When I encounter business owners who are mathematically minded, which I will admit are harder and harder to find nowadays, when I encounter them, I can actually show them how certain types of marketing campaigns will make them feel like their business is growing, while in fact it's eroding out from under them, because they're creating more work, and that 20% that used to produce all their profit is now 10% or 5%. And they're trying to keep a business afloat with 5% of their customers producing profit. And so it's just, once again, it's all about helping them understand at a deeper level, both internally and externally, what's going on in the minds of their customers.
Yeah, very important point. And I'm looking at the pictures behind you, and I see so many families. One of the things that we could speak to is the importance of work-life balance, and how there's so much misinformation about the topic, and how much people have kind of a misunderstanding. And, people think that it's not possible to have work-life balance, where all the people I work with, pretty much large percent, over 90% of the people we work with enjoy work-life balance after they've worked with us for a while, because balance is inner work. If you have inner coherence, if you know who you are, and your mind isn't cluttered, and you're not having all that mental chatter, which is hard to manage, by the way. I know we all have days where everything has happened that we wish hadn't happened, and then we come home, and then there's a family drama that we have to deal with, right? It's like it happens all the time. And it's kids are in a tough spot, adolescents are in a tough spot. It's like families are really, it's tough to run a family and business and get it all together. It's not easy without help. So it's really, I just want people to, when they listen and when they see, when they dig in, and when they go home and there's a traumatic situation that they have to deal with, there's drama that they have to deal with, there's uncertainty that they have to deal with, they're not alone. I haven't talked to one person who hasn't encountered that. I personally, I do this for a living. I deal with it because life is not, it's not rainbows and lollipops. I wish it was, but it's not. And so we have to really do additional work in order to really accomplish that wonderful cohesion in the family unit. So that, because if something isn't working at home, it bleeds into the work. It's when people are going through a divorce or there's stuff going on with their kids, no one can focus. I mean, who can focus with that?
Yeah, I will tell you, though, one of the things that you touched on, I think at the very beginning, Kathy, that really resonated with me, you talked about, the journey to get to understand the consciousness and moving forward. I sort of view home life balance a little differently, because for me, if you're becoming a better person, you're becoming better mind, you're better at time management, you're better at less stress, less worry. You have a better grasp of your consciousness. You're learning these tools for keeping all that crap out of your head. What happens is as you grow into a better person because of those things, I just think you become a better parent, you become a better spouse, you become a better entrepreneur, and all elements of your life are elevated.
Exactly.
Because you're just becoming a better person. And I think one of the things, and I see this with business owners a lot, is some of the best family people I know who spend time with the kids, and it's quality time. It's not sitting on the couch. It's going and doing things. It's enjoying time with their spouse. Are also very successful entrepreneurs because they just become better at living in life, and that translates to all elements of what they do. What I find is that a lot of times people who want high levels of success but actually aren't able to do the work required to make that happen, or aren't willing to do the work to make that happen, will often use the excuse of, well, I never want to be that successful. My wife and kids are far more too important for me to be devoting that much time to the office. And it's often, the home life balance is often used as an excuse to avoid doing the work on themselves that's needed for them to take things to the next level.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's the beauty of working on your consciousness, because you're right. When you elevate on that map of consciousness, everything kind of falls into place in order, because you have a good understanding of who you are, how you show up is different, how you understand, how you lean in and listen, how you empathize. Yeah, everything about you changes. Not that you're going to be perfect, because life happens and people make mistakes, but your level of understanding and awareness is increased to a level where people can relate and know that you understand where they're coming from. And when they know that you care because you have done your own inner work and you're not thinking about what you're going to say and what you're struggling with inside when you're listening, you're truly present and listening to what's going on and how that other person is feeling, then that human connection alone solves many problems. Because how many times have you heard people say, you just don't understand me. You just don't hear me. I don't feel heard. I don't feel like you care, so, and it's not that they don't, it's just that there's a disconnect, because they're going through things themselves they don't know how to process. And when you don't know how to process your own mess, which we all have, no one is exempt from it. I'm sorry. I'm sorry to say.
I wish people were.
It's messy. So, so when we have ways by which to process our own messes inside, then we can really truly be present and empathize in a meaningful way and connect with people we love and care for and people we lead, our teams. And so everything kind of, it just sort of in its own imperfect way falls into balance.
Absolutely. You become a better person.
Yep. Human. You become a better human.
Yeah. I recently came up with the phrase that entrepreneurship is just applied self-improvement.
That's
because
interesting. I love that.
because especially for solopreneurs, so much of their inner world projects into, if you have a team, then it's a number of factors. But if it's just you, then a lot of you is showing up, showing up out there. But I'm also reminded of someone we had on this show a few weeks ago, Justin Breen, who he is very laser focused on only even talking to people who are high, quick start, go getter action people. And when you talk to him, he sounds like one of those, hyper hustle entrepreneurs, because he's very much like, get it done, make it happen.
Mm-hmm.
But then he says, why? Because any minute I waste with someone who's, I'm not sure if I want, I don't know, is a minute he's not spending with his family.
Mm.
So when he's working, he is hyper hustle, get it done. A little bit of the don't care about your feelings, the feeling I want is success because we got it done. Let's go. Because my family's waiting at home, and I don't want to waste any time here doing this work stuff, because that's what's most important to me. And so it's interesting flip on the work-life balance. He is so intense in his work because he wants to get it done, make the money, move on. And so, John, to your point with that person who's like, oh, I don't want to be that kind of person. They're like, he'd rather make $30,000 in a job than $10,000 in a job, because that means he can do one job instead of 3 and go on vacation for 4 days with the family instead of working with another client.
Yeah, I mean, it's when you tap into your full consciousness, you don't have to be so, the focus and the intention is there, and you don't have to be like, I got to hurry up. See, when you're in that kind of an intense, it's in fear energy, and fear energy is not conducive to productive, well received and well landed outcomes. I think that when you can be incredibly a lot more productive once you tap into your consciousness, and you're able to be present, be in a way that the other person doesn't feel like they're in your way and they're standing in your way and your family, because that's always an uncomfortable situation. I mean, who wants to be on the receiving end of that as a vendor, as an employee? I mean, that's not a comfortable situation. I love guys and women who prioritize their families, but our work relationships are important too. There are our families also, and I think that I'm a huge advocate of creating this environment where everybody feels safe and comfortable and valued. They have, yes, they're not as important to us perhaps than our spouses and our children, but they're important, and to treat them in such a way that they would feel kind of unimportant is not, I think, what you're going for as an entrepreneur or a businessman, businesswoman, or CEO. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, the interesting thing about the way he approaches it is either you're not in his world because it's not someone else to work with, or if you are, it's a compliment. So it is. I mean, he works at a level of intensity and confidence when he talks about someone on the show, which is a rare thing, but it works well in that environment because he makes a firm decision, and if you're not a fit, he's not working with you. So it doesn't matter how he treats you; he's not treating you at all. He's treating you by saying, "This is not a fit for us to be together." And I think a lot of people are kind of like, "Well, I don't know," and this is something I've had to learn myself is that, and I see it online and I believe it, but then forget to live it. Which is, if it's not hell yes, it's hell no. I think a lot of people are in the hell maybe, and in that space, like, well, maybe this employee's okay. Well, maybe this client's okay. Well, maybe this line of business is okay. And I think that's where a lot of that fear and lack comes in. Is you're like, but is it? But what'll happen? And what if I let it go? And so you get a lot of wishy-washy, not quite committed sort of vibe, and then and not so good things happen. Whereas if you're decisive one way or the other, then it's everything there is hell yes. Because
I hear that. I agree. I agree with that. I misunderstood your first explanation of the guy.
Yeah.
But yeah, I hear that.
Well, the thing about it is I'm, one of my weaknesses that I'm trying to really shore up is developing leaders, and building leaders into there. And I'm spending a lot of time working with them to become servant leaders. I'm a big fan of Ken Blanchard's books involving servant leadership. And actually, being here in Kentucky, I look at what John Calipari does with the UK basketball team, and I didn't realize, but he has a long-standing relationship with Ken Blanchard. And so his coaching philosophy is that of servant leadership. And when I think about what Kathy's doing to develop these teams, having an employer or an entrepreneur who's willing to provide that service on his behalf to his team is only going to make for a better team and a better organization. And I think all of that kind of marries really well together.
Exactly, John. Exactly.
But when I'm also, thinking about that sort of, hell yes, hell no concept of, and with the servant leadership. So I mentioned at the beginning, the entrepreneur mentor community that I'm putting together. And one of the things I have to do is decide who I invite and who I don't invite. And I'm very much have that voice about like, well, but what if you don't invite them and they would have been good? Or what if they're offended they're not invited? And do I want to say no? And then I realize I have responsibility to the community, because I'm saying you come here, you're going to be working with a certain caliber of people. And a much greater fear than someone saying, why don't I make the cut in your group, should be someone saying, I worked with one of your mentors and they didn't treat me right. Like, that's what I need to be afraid of. And realizing that the most important thing, because originally the concept of the group, that I'll admit, is that I bring together good coaches and whatnot. They have courses and programs. People join the group to get a curated community of people that they might join a program, buy a course, and then there's a commission for doing business in the group. And I very quickly realized I don't necessarily want the biggest coaches, course creators, the ones who have great closing rates and great programs, because I could make more money that way. But it's not in integrity if I'm not completely sure. And maybe like I think they're good, but if I don't know, I don't want to not be sure. And I was recently on a webinar that I thought was going to be a training webinar. Thought they're going to teach something. I knew the guy doing it. I know he knows his stuff. And an hour in, I haven't learned anything because it actually was a sales webinar. Surprise! And the kind of people I'd invite to be a mentor wouldn't do that, because it would go against the way they function to spend an hour of someone's time not teaching them something, not providing some value in addition to the sales opportunity. Yes, there's an offer at the end. We all know there's an offer coming, but the value's got to be there. And it just kind of brought this sharply into focus of, that's who I'm building a community of. And I looked at the 44 mentors I already have and said, I'm going to tell them just to be sure, but I don't think I should need to tell them if I chose them right. And I don't think I do, because I want people who in every interaction, they're thinking, how can I help? How can I serve? I'll get paid at some point. I'm not worried about that. How can I serve these people in a way that makes them, and even if it's the worst sales pitch ever, how do you serve so well that at the end someone says, can I hire you somehow? Like, that's how you know you served well, is when you forget to make the offer and someone emails you afterwards like, do you do coaching? Do you have a program? Because then you've really provided the value.
It's you're familiar with Dave Durand, the founder of our company. He's I consider him one of my mentors. And one of the things that he said early on in our relationship, very, very early, and it just resonated with me, is that bad leadership is worse than no leadership at all. Every person has the right to be bad at their job, but no one has the right to be a bad leader. And that's just always resonated with me, because when you're a bad leader, it's not about you anymore. It's about affecting the lives of someone else. And when I think of your mentors I think your goal is to have good leaders in there, because if you don't, you could do more damage than good.
Yeah.
Precisely.
Holy crap.
What was that?
I said, now I'm feeling the pressure. I just realized what I took on here. Oh boy. All right. No, I'm up for it. I'm going to do this.
Yeah, no, it's so true. That is such a true statement. And I often say that about relationships too. There's nothing better than a wonderful relationship, and there's nothing worse than a bad one. You know, you just feel like, so it's true. And leadership is even more important because you impact not one person, but many. And the outcome of an entire organization. It's very true. So it's intentional leadership is really important. I love the whole notion of servant leadership. I think living a life of service for anybody is really where we find our meaning and purpose. Meaning and purpose beyond ourselves, beyond what we want to accomplish personally, is really what gives us that meaning that we all want. We want to live a joyful life. I think it's such an important way to think and lead.
Yeah, it's one of my favorite quotes from one of Ken Blanchard's book is to ask yourself, am I a servant leader, or is my leadership self-serving? And I think just putting that filter on yourself can really kind of guide you to where you want to be.
Yep. I think one of the great blessings I've had over the last 2 years is to meet a lot of successful servant leaders. Because I think one of the challenges people run into is like, well, I want to be a servant. I want to be good. I want to help people. I want to be a moral, ethical person. But everyone I know who's like that is broke. And everyone I know who lies, cheats, and steals is rich. Or everyone I know who's rich, lies, cheats, and steals. So do I want to be broke? That kind of sucks. And I have been blessed to meet so many people who are 6-figure, 7-figure, in some cases 8-figure earners, because not in spite of the fact that they're doing it from a place of service, from an ethical foundation. Now, do they do everything right? No. Is it possible that in a large organization run by a good person, there's a few bad actors who are doing things their own way? Yeah. Nobody's perfect.
Yeah.
But if from the top that's the intention, then it sets that tone, and eventually the system, if you have a good ethical leader with integrity, the system should shake itself out, and those people out of alignment will find themselves on the curb eventually. Because I've seen some very good organizations run by very good people that some very bad people have weaseled their way into. Because bad people are really good at pretending to be good people. Look at me. But eventually, by their fruit you shall know them.
Yeah, and do they have? And a lot of times, also the points that you both have made, John and Michael, about asking important questions. And when you ask these important questions, do you have the insight? What are having people on your team that really advise you properly, confidants, I think is really important too, because we all have blind spots, like you talked about earlier, Michael, and asking important and good questions are always good, but are you finding the right answers? Are you kidding yourself? Because what I have found, I know that when I do that self-analysis with my coaches, I have infinite ways of self-deception. Oh yeah, I do that. No. So I think that if we're all honest with ourselves, we all have infinite ways of self-deception. And it's so important to have someone in our team that holds us not only accountable in a caring way, but also has our back and say, well, you know what, you didn't pay attention to this, this isn't so. And so that's how growth ultimately happens, is with strong teams and strong leadership banding together in a commitment, working with people that they want to bring on, that they trust, that they know has the skills to really take them to where they want to go, and nail all of the communication and accelerate, their growth. Did we lose John?
I don't know. John, come back.
His frame is stuck, unfortunately.
Does seem that way. Well, we have come to the top of the hour. So we'll share our final thoughts. Kathy, I'll have you go first, and hopefully John will reappear while you're doing that. So basically share whatever final thoughts you might have, and I'll put your website back on the screen as well. So
yeah,
final
if you
thoughts,
guys if you guys want to learn more about how to elevate and learn about consciousness, we're actually going to be holding a workshop that we do only once a year. This year starts February 1st, 2023. If you want to learn more about that, go on our website and fill out a contact sheet, or just ping me on LinkedIn, message me on LinkedIn, and we'll be happy to include you in all the webinars that are going to be coming up for the rest of the year. So you can come and learn more about what it's all about, how you can strengthen yourself, your family, because we do the work both at homes as well as organizations and leaders. So, and one last message to people out there: things are tough. We have really come through an emotional tsunami, and what we want to do is be kind to ourselves, have self-compassion, have self-empathy, have self-love, and make time for really calming the mind and finding that quiet place, and go within and see who that precious expression of life is that you are, and spend a little more time with him or her.
Fantastic. And John, final thoughts.
Yeah. Hey, sorry, I don't know where I went there for a minute. Just disappeared. Yeah, I just wanted to kind of touch off of what Kathy just said. We live in a world where there are a lot of people who benefit and profit from anger and fear, and really capitalize, and they are vested in us being angry and afraid. And so it's so easy to allow that, to get trapped into that, and allow that to affect the rest of our lives. And so I would encourage you, when you recognize the people that are out there trying to motivate you to be afraid for their own profit, turn them off. Turn off the TV, turn off the internet, stay away from those, and focus on the positive things you have in your life. I mean, one of the great books involving wealth and building wealth is from 1910, Wallace Wattles' The Science of Getting Rich. Now, it's not an easy read, but in it, he talks about how important it is to live life from a sense of scarcity, of abundance instead of scarcity, and how important gratitude is toward pursuing your dreams. And you can't be thankful for what's happening around you when you're afraid.
I think we lost him again.
Yep, there we go. So take advantage. So be thankful, show gratitude, live with a sense of abundance, and educate yourself on how to run your business and how to understand how your customers are reacting, and elevate yourself to a higher level, and you're going to see the level of success you want to have.
All right, well, fantastic. This has been a great talk. I did hear from our one missing guest. Apparently, he didn't get the invitation link, so we'll reschedule him to a future week, as we'll reschedule the other two, one of whom has COVID and one of whom ended up being double booked, because we get popular people. What can I say? Right. But the universe puts here the people that we needed to be here, and I think this was a great show. So thank you all for being on. Thank you at home for watching. Hope you got a lot out of it. And you're going to hit this red button. Stick around for a second after I go off the air. Don't go away.